We all need a helping hand sometimes when it comes to our careers. An extra pair of eyes on a CV, a lift to a job interview, a last-minute clean shirt after you spilled strawberry jam down the front of yours. Again. The same is true of wrestlers, as these 10 performers would not be as famous as they are now without the aid of a fellow grappler. Of course, that is not to say that they're bad, didn't pay their dues, or don't deserve their fame. Far from it, we're just looking at people who got some vital assistance from their peers, whether intentionally or otherwise. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 wrestlers who owe their success to other wrestlers. Join us. Number 10, Shark Boy. Fans of the original TNA will have fond memories of Dean Roll, better known by his aquatic alter ego, Shark Boy. Roll first developed the character on the independent scene in the 90s, trademarking the name in 1999, which later led to a hilarious lawsuit between him and the makers of the 2005 film The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl. Take that, Taylor Lautner. After a fairly modest run, everything changed for our fishy friend after he fell into a kayfabe coma in 2008. Upon waking up, everyone was very confused to find that he was now talking and acting like a certain Texas rattlesnake. Clearly, somebody heard Roll do a Steve Austin impression backstage and decided that it needed to be featured on TV. Thus, Stone Cold Shark Boy was born. He would adopt the stunner as his finisher, relabeling it the Chummer, would ask audiences to give him a shell yeah, and proclaim that things were the fishing line because Shark Boy said so. These puns may sound tortured, but they were actually rather entertaining. Though Shark Boy was already an established talent, without his stellar Austin impression, he wouldn't be as beloved as he is today. Number 9, Mustafa Ali. In 2016, the world lost David Bowie, Alan Rickman, George Michael, Prince, and Carrie Fisher, plus there was a whole load of political stuff that we won't get into now because they will cause big arguments. Thankfully, WWE gave us something to take our minds off all the bleakness in the form of the Cruiserweight Classic. This was a 32-man tournament to crown the very best tiny boy wrestler in the entire world. There were a number of alternative entrants available for the tournament, just in case somebody got injured or had to pull out. These included current AEW performer Aaron Solo and former TNA wrestler Jesse Sorensen, but only one of these replacements was actually given a chance to shine. Brazilian wrestler Zombie encountered visa issues whilst trying to enter the United States and was duly pulled from the bracket. In his place, WWE chose an American wrestler instead. His name was Mustafa Ali. Without Zombie's passport problems, Ali would have never gotten signed as part of the Cruiserweight division. That means there would have been no victory over Daniel Bryan, no WrestleMania match with Cedric Alexander, and no retribution. What a horrible world that would be to live in. Number 8, Asia. When Vince Russo jumped to WCW in 1999, he quickly went about trying to recreate some of the magic he had made for the Federation on Turner TV. Unfortunately, what this actually meant was a load of confusing storylines and blatant rip-offs of things that he had done whilst working for Vince McMahon. One of his most egregious instances of self-copying came the night after Halloween Havoc 99 in a segment with The Revolution. The group launched an attack on the Filthy Animals, which involved a debuting muscular woman. This was Asia, with a Y because of China. Do you get it? It's good, isn't it? Isn't Vince Russo clever? Yes, Vinnie Roo had not only pinched the idea of a large menacing female bodyguard, but he'd also stolen her naming convention in the least imaginative way possible. Asia, who was played by bodybuilder Christy Wolf, was a China clone in every sense of the word, and fans saw right through it. Still, she did manage to enjoy some success in WCW, working alongside performers such as Perry Saturn and Dean Malenko, and having rivalries with the likes of Tori Wilson and Medusa. Sure, she never hit Jeff Jarrett with a toilet seat, but you can't have everything. Number 7, The Renegade. In the lead up to Uncensored 1995, Hulk Hogan hinted that someone very special would be in his corner during his main event match with Vader. The ultimate surprise was very much supposed to make viewers think that the Ultimate Warrior was going to show up, but instead, we got the Wish.com version. In Hogan's corner was the Renegade, a knockoff so blatant they might as well not have even bothered. Richard Wilson, the man behind the character, had a similar physique to Warriors, similarly long hair, and a similar habit of yelling long, incomprehensible sentences to whoever was in earshot. Wilson got a decent push off the back of this reveal, despite being the living embodiment of that "we have such and such at home" meme. At the Great American Bash, he defeated Arn Anderson to become WCW Television Champion, holding the title for the next 3 months. It was the peak of a career that only really came about because of another far more charismatic performer, but you can't knock the guy for grabbing the opportunity. Number 6, Virgil. Before he was drawing crowds of millions at conventions, Michael Jones was a key fixture of WWE's golden era as the long-suffering manservant of Ted DiBiase. Virgil, whose name was a rib on the real name of Virgil Runnels, aka Dusty Rhodes, would do all of the $1 Million Man's dirty work until one day he had had enough and snapped on his employer. In the real world, he would have been dismissed immediately and probably sent to prison, but this was wrestling, so he got cheered instead. Unfortunately for the former Soul Train Jones, he was nowhere near as popular outside of his dynamic with the $1 Million Man. All of his biggest highlights as a single star came whilst feuding with his former boss, his other most memorable encounter being a torrid SummerSlam bout with Nails in 1992. Blah. Even when he jumped over to WCW, he was put back together with Ted as part of the New World Order. Now he was called Vincent, which was a play on Vince McMahon. The guy literally couldn't even get a name that didn't already belong to somebody else. To be fair though, the notoriety has kept him well stocked in meat sauce ever since. Number 5, David Flair. You could make the case that every child of a famous performer owes their own success to their parents, but that feels like a different subject for a different time. Instead, let's zero in on a guy who really wouldn't have gotten anywhere were it not for his legendary last name. Ric Flair's eldest boy was tied to his father from the get-go, teaming with him in his first WCW match at Sold Out 1999. Then, just a month later, David turned on Rick to join the New World Order. Come on, it's not like Rick wouldn't have done the same thing. Despite being very, and I mean very, limited in the ring, David made a decent go of it, even winning the prestigious United States Championship. Okay, maybe winning isn't the right term. He was literally handed the belt by his old man, who was the fictional president of WCW at the time. Things like this really don't help your case, Junior H. Without his legendary dad, there is absolutely no way that David Flair would have ever been allowed anywhere near a wrestling ring. Charlotte might be annoying sometimes, but at least she can really get it done in there. Number 4, Demolition. Among the many tag teams that have come and gone across wrestling history, few have made quite the same impact as the Road Warriors. Hawk and Animal's flashy appearance combined with their hard-hitting in-ring personas made them stars everywhere they went. So naturally, the companies that didn't have access to them wanted a piece of the action. WWE's answer to the Road Warriors was Demolition, comprised of Axe, Smash, and later Crush, although we don't really talk about Crush. Like their NWA counterparts, Axe and Smash also painted their faces, wore strange body armor, and were presented as rough and gruff as they came. That said, in a real fight, Hawk and Animal would have eaten these guys for lunch. Though they could have easily been dismissed as copycats, Demolition got hugely over in McMahon land, becoming one of the standout tag teams of the late 80s and early 90s. They were 3-time World Tag Team Champions, with their first reign standing as the longest in company history for nearly 30 years. It all went quite well, you know, until the actual Road Warriors signed for WWE and basically cancelled out Demolition's popularity. Oops. Number 3, Dwayne Gil. Sometimes a wrestler will be given a gimmick that should sink their career, but they turn it into absolute gold. If you want a prime example of this, look no further than Dwayne Gil. In the early 90s, Gil was a familiar jobber in the Fed before taking a break and returning in 1998 to retake his place as enhancement talent. Nice one. After spending some time in the Job Squad, Gil somehow won the Light Heavyweight Championship from Christian. This is what eventually led to the creation of his most famous mantra, the name that would define his career for decades to come: Gilberg. As a parody of top WCW star Goldberg, Gilberg would come out to piped-in crowd chants, have fire extinguishers blown in his face whilst people held up sparklers on the entrance ramp, and would pull funny faces in an exaggerated homage to the man on the other channel. Gilbert remains one of the most popular comedy gimmicks in WWE history, appearing on TV as recently as 2021. His reign with the light heavyweight title was actually the longest in company history, but that's probably because they forgot that belt even existed. Number 2, Brutus Beefcake. As the old saying goes, it's not who you know, it's who you blow. Wait, that's not right. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Nobody in the history of professional wrestling embodies that statement more than Ed, please get me a job, Terry Leslie. Leslie began his wrestling career in the 1970s, alongside the man who would later define his career. The two started out as kayfabe brothers, Ed and Terry Boulder, before Leslie would change his name to Dizzy Hogan once his fake sibling took on the first name of Hulk. Everywhere Hulk Hogan went thereafter, Leslie would follow at his heels like a loyal dog. When Hogan was in the WWF, Leslie was there as Brutus the Barber Beefcake, occasional on-air best bud with the man himself. In WCW, Leslie performed under a litany of names, including the Butcher during his program with Hogan that saw the main event Starrcade 1994. Seriously, Brother Bruti main evented the WCW equivalent to WrestleMania, all thanks to his friendship with the Hulkster. Drink that sweet, sweet nepotism in, folks. It is true that Leslie does have some talent and charisma, but without his lifelong association with his human meal ticket, there is no way he would have reached the heights that he did. Number 1, Kane. If you thought this entry was just going to be about The Undertaker, then think again, because it turns out several other of Big Glenn's gimmicks have been tied to other wrestlers. First up, there was Isaac Yankem DDS, the demonic personal dentist of Jerry Lawler. Then Jacobs portrayed the fake Diesel following Kevin Nash's split from the company, although calling that a success might be a bit of a stretch. Ultimately though, when it comes to talking about this man's work, it's gotta be Kane! Jacobs famously debuted as The Undertaker's masked sibling at Bad Blood 1997, ripping the Hell in a Cell door off its hinges and starting an on-again, off-again rivalry that would last the next several decades. Sometimes this was a good thing, other times not so much. See the entirety of 2010 for further details. Without The Undertaker, and to a lesser extent Paul Bearer, there would have been no reason for Kane to come into WWE. Sure, Jacobs made the character his own, but when he looks back on the creation that made him a household name, he must feel a hell of a lot of gratitude towards the dead man.